Hello and welcome to the first lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about accessing the command line. So we are dealing with Mac OS and different Linux flavors. Now the tricky part here is the different Linux flavors. On Mac OS, it's pretty easy. You can hit Command Space to get your Spotlight search and simply type in terminal and this or terminal.app, and this will bring up this particular application that I'm going to be using. From this point forward, I'm going to be calling the command line the terminal. Think of them as interchangeable terms. Now, if you are on Linux, you are going to want to open a program called, and I'll type this out, bash. Likely, your flavor of Linux comes with a program called bash. Now, if it doesn't come with bash, you can install another program like ZSH or pretty much any other third-party command line program that you want, and you can use that instead. They all work the same. It's just really what kind of extra features you get. So I'm using the bare bones here, just something very, very basic. So what I would like you to do is go ahead and find your app called terminal.app or bash, or install a new one if you like. I would say if you're brand new, maybe don't install a new program right now and just stick with the basics. But go ahead and open up terminal.app or bash. And again, what I'm going to be calling this from this point forward is just terminal. Your first command. All right, let's take a look at your first command here. Now you should already have terminal open or bash open or some sort of command line program open. All you had to do is open it. Every computer comes with one, so you shouldn't have had to go and look for one. You just need to figure out where it is on your computer, on your operating system. So in this one, we're going to use two different commands, actually. We're going to get started with, I'll just clear that. We're just going to get started with something really basic here. So if I type in the word date, it gives me the date. It's Wednesday, November 11th, 2020 right now. If I go ahead and type CAL, cal, I get the calendar. It shows me exactly where I am in the middle of the month. Now, this is all I want you to do to get started. Once you have your terminal open, go ahead and type date, that's D-A-T-E, or type CAL, or actually, you know what, do both. You're not going to hurt anything doing this particular command. It's just going to show you the date and the calendar. So go ahead, give that a shot. Once you have typed in those two commands, head on over to that next lesson where we figure out exactly what directory our terminal is in right now. Okay, let's take a look at printing your current working directory. How do you print your current location? So when you have your terminal open, there's something to know, is you are inside of a folder. You're always inside of a folder. Inside of an operating system, you're always inside of a folder. Now moving forward, I'm going to use the word directory. So I'll use directory and folder interchangeably, but whenever you hear me say directory, I'm also referencing a folder. It's the exact same thing. Now to figure out where you currently are, you can type pwd, and that gives me the exact location. So I'm in the folder here, you can see this on the left, called users and Caleb Tulling. And that's all. That's all there is to it. Now, if you're on a partitioned hard drive, so you have a different user, you might have a sub-user, you might have Linux running on your system, so it's not going to say /users, it's just going to say something else. That's okay. Just know that this is a path to where you currently are. So I'm in the users folder and then the Caleb Tulling subfolder. You're going to be somewhere different. Now don't worry about creating any sort of directory at this point or moving into another directory. We're going to cover all of that in future lessons. And also, as a heads up, I've been using this command called figlet. This does not come with your computer by default. This just lets me print out this nice text nicely without having to figure out how to write it by hand. So that's going to save me about an hour on every lesson. So don't worry about this particular command yet. I might maybe touch on that a little bit later, but if not, just know that this is a third-party thing that I've installed. So don't worry too much about this. Opening directories from your terminal. All right, let's take a look at opening directories from your terminal. So at this point in time, we know that we are inside some form of a folder, some sort of directory. And I'm using the word dirs here, short for directories. You might also hear people call them dirs. I call them dirs because it's like directory, dir. So for this, all we really need to do is, on our command line, on Mac, you can type open dot, and this is going to open up this particular folder for me. Just like that. It shows me all of the different folders that I have inside of my Caleb Tulling user folder. Now, if you are on Ubuntu, that's going to be different. It's not going to be the open command. It's going to be, see if I can spell this right, Nautilus? I believe that's how I spell it. Nautilus dot should open it up, or you can hit Nautilus, and then ideally you should be able to hit tab and it'll show you all the folders you can open, and then you can just type one of those in. Now, if that doesn't work for you, there's another one called GNOME. GNOME open, and then you can just open up that folder as well. It really depends on your flavor of Linux. There's so many different flavors of Linux out there, it's hard to keep track of all of them. So go ahead, give this a shot, open up your terminal, and then just type open dot. Or if you're on Mac, type in Nautilus dot or gnome-open dot. See how you can open up your directory. Depending on your flavor of Linux, though, you might maybe need to go off and do a little bit of Googling on the proper command for your flavor of Linux, your type of operating system. How to display files and directories. Okay, so this is really, really important. This is probably one of the most useful commands and probably one of the most common commands you're going to see. So when we're in a folder here, we can see that we're in a folder by using print working directory, pwd. And I know that if I open this up, I see all of these different folders and files and things like that. Let's go ahead and just close that. And what I can type instead is ls. ls will show me all my folders, all my directories, and a bunch of my files. Now here's the thing, is it's not going to show you any of the hidden files. And that's really important because we need to see some of these hidden files. If you ever use Git or GitHub, there are often hidden files like a .gitignore. And what I'm saying there is .gitignore. That's a very, very common file, or .gitkeep, .vimrc. There's lots of different hidden files, and ls just simply is not going to show it to you. But what will show it to you is ls-la. And what I'm saying here is capital L, capital A, just in lowercase. So -LA. So let's go ahead and type ls-LA. And this is going to give us a nicer view. And I think this is nicer anyways, because it shows us everything. And you can see all of my hidden files in here. I've got .npm, .npmrc, .nvm, .profile, .putty, .pyenv. I got all sorts of files in here. But it also shows me the read-write access, what I'm allowed, who owns this, the group that's allowed to own this particular file or folder, and a bunch of other things that honestly at this point in time we don't need to know. However, we can now see all files and folders even if they're hidden, which is really, really important. So again, that command, and I'm using clear here just to clear my terminal, just to get it out of the way. And you can always hit up to go and get that last command. You can just keep hitting up. So that's the up arrow and down arrow. Up, up, down, down. So I can type up, up, and it shows me this. Again, that's ls-la. Okay, let's take a look at how we can change our directories. So if you open up your terminal and you type pwd, such as this, you're going to see that you are in a particular directory. And we now know that we can type ls, and this will give us all of our folders and files, not the hidden files, but just all of the visible files that we can see if we were to normally open this up in, let's say, Finder or Nautilus or Explorer or whatever program you use that's visual. So what I can do now is I can change directories, and we use a command called cd. That stands for change directories. And so I can do cd, and if I just hit tab a few times, you can see that there's a lot of different folders in here. If you ever get this and you can't get out of it, just hit Q. The letter Q will get you out of things like that. So if I type ls, I can see, let's pick a folder. I want to go into, let's go into music. So I can do cd, and then I type music, M-U-S, and I can hit tab for auto-completion. And that just allows me to not have to write as much code, or not really code, not have to write as much on my keyboard, and maybe have a typo in there. Typos suck on the command line, so tab completion is going to be your best friend. We'll talk about this a lot moving forward as well. So cd into a particular folder, and you see that slash there, that's important. And you can now see that says /music. And if I do pwd again, I'm now in users, Caleb Tallien, music. Now I can do ls in here, and I can see that I've got open board and iTunes. Let's go into iTunes, cd IT, tab, and now I'm in iTunes. I can do PWD. You can see exactly where you're working. Let's do another LS. And we can see we've got all sorts of things in here. Now, I don't really know what any of these are, so it doesn't really matter at this point. But what I'm going to do is show you how we can get out of a folder. So to get into a folder is really easy. We just cd folder name or the directory name. To get out of a folder, to move one up, we can do cd ... And you can see that that's automatically changing it for me. So if I do pwd, that wasn't right. It was cd ... pwd again. And you can see that it's changing from users Caleb Tallien music, where I was originally in the subfolder of iTunes. I'm now in just music, and then I did it once more, and now I'm printing the working directory, and I'm back to where I started. This is my home. On most computers, you can also do cd / and that will bring you home. So if I go into cd music, for instance, I can jump directly to a particular folder I want. And in this case, I'm just going to go straight to home. Now let's do this. Let's cd into multiple folders at the same time. Let's do cd music, and let's hit tab again. It's going to show me what I can do in there. iTunes, tab completion. I hit tab once or twice more. I can see a little bit more. Let's just go into here. And so I've cd'd into 2 folders at the same time there, one subfolder into another. And so if I clear and do pwd, we can do this. Now, if I want to jump back to where my home is, I can just do cd / and that's going to bring me back home. So you can cd into individual folders or directories. You can also cd out of individual folders or directories, or you can jump directly to a location that you already know of. Now, what I would like you to do is open up your terminal, type pwd, type ls, and then I want you to cd into a directory here. So pick a directory, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to do anything in there. We could just like cd into our library, and then do pwd, and then do an ls in there, and see that all the files have changed. Things should look different. And then you can cd .. to get out of that, pwd once more, and you can see at the bottom left of my screen here, it says users Caleb Tallien. Yours is going to say users your username. Or if you're on Linux, it's going to say maybe something slightly different. Lastly, go ahead and clear your screen, and you are ready to move on to that next lesson. Searching for files in a directory. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways we can search for a file in a directory using a Unix-like system. There are tons of different ways. Now I'm going to show you one way that's going to expose you to what's called a pipe command. And so what we're going to do here is, if I do, first of all, pwd, I'll show you where I am. I'm in just my regular folder here, my user folder. If I do ls -la, we're going to see a lot of different things. And sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes it's just too much to look through. And so we want to search for something in particular. Now again, there's a lot of different ways we can do this, or what we can do is ls -la pipe, and so that's usually above your enter key on a standard North American English keyboard. That's the pipe. It's not an I, it's not an L, it's a pipe. So make sure you hit the right character there. grep, grep, and then we're going to type in what do we want to look for. Let's look for anything that has a .py in it. And there we go. So now we're filtering through. So what this is going to do here is, this says, do this entire ls-la command. Then once you've done that, funnel that into another command called grep, in which case we can then filter by some sort of text. And we said .py, so I want to look for any files that have .py in it. I've got .pysave, .ipynb, .ipython, .jupyter, .pyenv, .pylint, .python history. And so you can see that it really filters things out quite nicely. Now, if I wanted to get a little more explicit with it, I could also do something like web. Maybe I've got multiple folders called websites, website 1, website 2, or maybe I've only got the one, like right here. This one only returned the one, so we have websites, and we can cd into websites. Now, what I would like you to do is go ahead, type ls-la, use that pipe command, grep, and then look for something that does exist. Because if you look for something that doesn't exist, well, guess what? It's not going to find anything. But if you look for something that does exist, such as Let's just type the word Python. Oh, that doesn't exist either. And that's because I just cleared there. If I go up, there we go. That's better. So look for something that does exist and filter it out. You might even notice that originally they're files. You might even notice right off the bat that they're folders. Either way, go ahead and do ls-la pipe grep and then look for a particular term. It doesn't have to be Python. Just look for a particular term. Also, trial and error this. See if it's case sensitive. Okay, let's talk about renaming files. In the command line world, the act of renaming a file is the exact same as moving a file. And so instead of actually renaming a file, what we're going to do is we're going to move it. And we do that with the mv command. Move, mv, move. Just like how cd stands for change directory, mv stands for move. And we're going to move a file. So if I do ls-la, I'm going to see at the very end here, I have this file called zzz.txt. And what if I wanted to rename that? Well, what I could do here is, first of all, ls-la grep, we learned this in the last lesson, zzz or zzz, and I've got a file in there. So what I can do now is type mv zz and then hit tab for autocompletion. Hopefully you have autocompletion. That's going to be a lifesaver. If you don't have autocompletion, you might want to find a different program. But Terminal on Mac has autocompletion automatically. And now we can rename this to yyy.txt. And if I do this, ls-la grep zzz, we're not going to see anything. It doesn't show up. If I do ls-la grep yyy, it shows up. I can also do just standard ls and we can see that it's in here, yyy.txt. So that's how we rename a file. Pretty easy. We do move the original file name dot whatever extension, and then we change it to, or the second parameter is going to be the new file name dot whatever extension you want. Now what I would like you to do is I would like you to ls, pick a folder, and see if you can find a file that if you rename it, it's not going to be a big deal. You can always also open up your Finder and create a new file in here. Like I've got a new file called yyy.txt. You can go ahead and create a new file in there using VS Code or Microsoft Word or anything like that, and then hop back on over to your command line. Make sure you find that file. So I've got yyy.txt and then rename it. So simply do mv yyy.txt, and I'm going to change that back to zzz2.txt. Now I can do ls. yyy.txt is not there, but zzz2.txt does exist. Copying files. Let's take a look at how we can copy a file. So in the last lesson, we talked about moving a file. In this lesson, we're going to talk about copying a file so we can have a duplicate. First off, let's do ls, and I can see I've got zzz2.txt. Now, if I ever wanted to copy that, copy and paste, and it's a lot like Command C, Command V, or on Windows, Control C, Control V, or on Linux, it's whatever your command option is or your control option is. Usually it's control. So what we can do here is CP, stands for copy, and it takes the original file name dot whatever the extension is, and then you can copy that to new file name .txt. So as an example, what I can do here is I can do cp zz. I'm going to hit tab for auto completion, and I'm going to change this to, or I'm going to copy this to something else. So let's do zzz3.txt. Now this isn't going to show us anything, but if we do ls, we have it. There we go, zzz2, zzz3. Now just as one more example, we can copy using the cp command. And let's do zzz. Well, look, there's two of them now. When I do auto completion, it only gets up to the 3 z's. There's a 2 and a 3. If I do tab, it'll show me that there's 2 options. I have to give it one more character. And so let's go ahead and copy number 3, and let's change that to new file.py, as if this was going to be a new Python file. So I can do ls, and I can find my new file.py in here. I can also do ls-la. Let's grep this. And let's look for any .python files. And there's actually quite a few in here because they were all hidden before. Let's look for new file.py. And it shows me that it's in there. So what I would like you to do is give that a shot. Try to copy one file to another file. You're not going to do any harm by copying a file because, well, you're not deleting anything that's important. So just be careful that once we get to deletion stuff, that can be a little bit trickier. I'll give you proper warnings when we get around there. But for now, you can copy any file that you want using the cp command, file1.txt, file2.txt. Go ahead, give that a shot. When you're done that, let's go ahead and create a brand new directory using the command line. Creating new directories. We can create a new directory with the make directory command. So I'm saying mkdir, make directory is equal to the mkdir command, make directory. And so we can do pwd, and if I do ls here, we're going to see that my current example folder doesn't show up. I'm going to call it example, and it's not in here. So what I can do is mkdir example. I'm going to give it a capital E. Now, try not to give it spaces. A lot of command line programs, actually just a lot of programs in general, don't enjoy spaces. They can tolerate them, but they don't enjoy them. So if you can, use dashes or underscores or camel case it or title case it, like example folder, something like that. Try not to use spaces if you don't have to in folder names or in file names. Again, computers just don't really like that. They'll tolerate it, but they don't really like it. So let's do mkdir example, and I can do ls. And where are we? There it is, example. There is a folder there. And so what I can do now is type pwd. I can cd into the example folder, pwd again, and you can see that I'm in users Caleb Tallien example. And now if I open this up, and if you're on Linux, open command is not going to work for you. We talked about this a lot earlier. You're going to want to use like nautilus dot or gnome open dot. It's going to be different for different versions of Linux. So let's go ahead and open this. And I have absolutely nothing in here. It's just an empty folder. But you can actually see that I'm on my Macintosh HD users Caleb Tallien example. And that's the folder that I currently live in on my command line. So again, if I just print the working directory, you'll see exactly where you are. Now go ahead, give that a shot, make a new directory, call it example if you like, and then I would like you to cd into that directory, and then I would like you to cd out of that directory. And by the way, to cancel, all I'm doing is hitting Control C. That seems to cancel whatever I'm doing here. So whatever I'm doing, if there's too many typos and I just want to give up, I can just do Control C, and that gets me out of here on Mac. It might be a little bit different on Linux. Let's go ahead and create a new empty file. So in the last lesson, I created a folder called example. And if I do ls in here, there's nothing in here. ls-la shows me that there's nothing in there. Now what I can do is I can run this particular command called touch. And that's just going to create a new file. It's not going to have anything in it. It's going to be basically empty, and it's going to be as close to 0 bytes as it can possibly be. So it's the smallest file size out there. And I'm going to create a new file here in this example folder called example file.txt. Now I can do ls-la, I see it in there, ls, I see it in there. I can open dot, and I'm going to see it in here. Now in that last lesson, if you're following along with me here, lesson by lesson, there was nothing in this particular folder. And as proof, let's go ahead and create another folder, another file rather. Touch, new file 22222, this way we know which one it is. Let's open up our Finder again, and we can see new file 22222.txt exists, and its file size 0 bytes. Both of them are empty files. There's literally nothing in there. Now what I would like you to do is go ahead and cd into some sort of directory. So if you don't have a test directory already, go ahead and make a test directory with mkdir. For example, I did mkdir example. And then you're going to want to cd into that directory, so cd example. And then you're going to want to touch a new file. So just touch it so it exists. Touch new file.txt. Lastly, if you'd like to, you can always verify by opening your folder and making sure that your file actually exists. You can even open that file in like a text editor if you want and see that there's absolutely nothing in there. Editing files in the command line. Okay, so this is getting into some interesting territory here. So In the last example, I created a couple of files here. So let's do ls-la, and I can see that I've got example file.txt and new file 2222222.txt. Let's say I wanted to edit the example file.txt, but I wanted to do it straight from the command line. There's a few different ways we can do this. So I already have an example file here. If you don't have an example file, you can create an example file with touch example file.txt. Now there are two primary ways that we can edit a file through the command line. Actually, there's a lot of different ways, but there's two primary ways. There's a program called Vim, which is really complicated and amazingly powerful, which I absolutely love. I really enjoy using Vim, but it's not beginner friendly whatsoever. That requires its own course. We're not going to use that. We're going to use a different one called Nano. So we can type Nano, and then I just typed there to get a little bit slower, EX, and then I hit tab for auto completion. And this brings me into a text editor. And so now I can do, hello world, this is a new file. And remember that this was 0 bytes originally. Now, this is tricky because we need to save, which we're used to Command S or Control S. This is different. We need Control O to write out. So hit Control O. File name to write is going to confirm that. You hit enter. It wrote 1 line. Now I can hit Control X to exit. And that gets rid of that. So I essentially went into a program to edit a text file and left the program. And now I'm back on my regular terminal where we're used to being. So if I do ls-la, we're going to see that new file 22222 has a file size of 0 bytes, whereas example file.txt has 31 bytes in it. Now let's go ahead and open this. And we can right click and open with, and I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. And here we can see, hello world, this is a new file. And so that's what I wrote in the command line. Let's go ahead and do this once more. Nano, example, and let's just go down 1 line. I'm just going to use my arrows to move around. Let's go down a line and say this is the second line. Control O to write. It's going to ask you if you want to write it to this file. You say yes. Control X to exit. Open my folder, and I can open this with Visual Studio Code again. It's the same file that was open before. Hello, this is a new file. This is a second line. And now what's really cool about this is we can mix and match different editors. So we can say this is from VS Code. I'm not going to mind the typo there. So that's a third line. And if I go back to my command line here and type nano example file, we can see this is from VS Code. Let's say there's a typo in here and we just want to fix this real quick. We could do this. Change that typo. Control O, hit enter, Control X, and that file is fixed. If you're ever wondering, is it actually fixed? You can always do this and just Control X again. And there we go. We are editing files on the command line using Nano. Now, if you really like this, and some people really like editing files on the command line, you can look into a program called Vim. It's very, very powerful. It's not super intuitive, but it is made for shortcut power users. And some people are incredibly fast at it. But it is not super intuitive. So that is going to take some exploration on your own part. For this course, I'm going to recommend that you don't learn Vim. Just stick with Nano for now. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how you can actually display all the internal guts or the goods from a file without leaving your command line, without going into Nano. Displaying internals of a file without editing it. And so in the last lesson, what we did was, if we do ls, we have this file here called example file, and we could nano ex, hit tab, and we can see that there's 3 lines in here. Hello world, this is a new file. This is a second line. This is from VS Code. Let's exit that with Control X. And if I clear this, we can actually see what's in here. We can do cat, and this stands for concatenation. We're actually not using this properly. We're not concatenating anything. We just want to see what's in a file. And so cat allows us to do that. We can cat ex, hit tab for auto completion again, and it shows us what's in that file. Very simple. Cat, and then your file name. And again, I just did ex. I don't want to type that whole thing out in case I make a typo. I've made enough typos already in my life and throughout these videos here. Ex tab will get you the file name. And it just shows you everything that's in the file. So now what we can do is we can say example, let's edit this. This is a fourth line, Control O, Control X, cat ex ample file.txt, and it says this is a fourth line. And so that is now displaying all of our text that's inside of this file. It's working perfectly. Now what I would like you to do is I want you to do something a little more involved here. I want you to create a brand new empty file. Then I want you to nano that empty file, write something in there. Don't forget to write it out. So you have to save it with Control O and then exit with Control X. And then I want you to cat that file out. So in this order, touch, nano, cat. Go ahead and give that a shot. When you are ready, let's head on over to that next lesson. How to remove a file. So first of all, I want to give you a warning here. Be careful when you remove anything using the command line. So usually when you delete something off of your computer, there's some sort of buffer. There's a trash can, a recycle bin, a bin. I don't know what it's called on your computer, but usually there's some way to recover a file. And really all that's doing is moving it from this particular directory to a trash directory. And that's all it's doing. And then you empty your trash and it actually properly deletes it. And that's just a fail-safe for people. It's a nice little feature for people who aren't really savvy with computers. On the command line, we do not get that. So let's do an example here. We get two files here when I do ls. And let's say I wanted to delete new file 2.txt. I can do rm, stands for remove. I can do rm, new, hit tab, and I can delete that file. And when I hit enter, nothing happens. If I hit ls, that file's gone. It's not sitting in my trash. It's not sitting anywhere. It is gone forever. And it is really, really hard to get that file back, if not, in a lot of cases, impossible to get that file back. So be careful when you're deleting things. What I would recommend is don't use tab completion here. Don't do what I did. So if you're going to delete a file, actually type it out. Example-file.txt. Now, I don't want to delete this file because I may still work with it a little bit in the next couple of lessons. I'm not entirely sure. But let's go ahead and keep that. And so I'm just going to delete all of that and not delete that file. But again, it's as easy as rm and then just the file name dot whatever extension it has. That will delete it from your computer. Again, I want to give you a really big warning here. Be very careful with this. You don't get that file back when you delete it. There is no recovery system. It's gone forever. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and explore how we can remove an entire directory. How to remove a directory. So in the last lesson, we did rm, and then we just put in a file name, and it removed the file. But that's not going to work with this directory. So let's go ahead and move up one directory here, and I can do ls, and we can see I've got this example folder in here. Now, I made this example folder, so I know it's safe to delete. And always be careful when you're deleting things. Again, you're not necessarily going to be able to get that folder back. You're not necessarily going to be able to get your files back. So when you delete something, assume it's gone forever. We can do rm example, and this is going to autocomplete for us, but this actually isn't going to work. It says example is a directory. So what we can do instead is rm dir ex, hit tab for autocompletion. It says directory is not empty. Okay, so now we have to go into our directory here. ls-la, we've got one file in here. We can do rm example file.txt, ls-la, and we see that's gone. And so we learned about rm in that last lesson, so I'm not going to cover that again. But what we can do is move back up a directory, ls. We can see we've got example folder in here. We can now do rm dir example ls. That folder is gone. It was over here somewhere. It's no longer there. Now, let's say you want to delete a folder with files in it. Let's go ahead and clear this. Let's create a new file, new directory. I'm going to call it example, so just the same as the last one. cd into example, and I'm going to touch 1.txt and touch 2.txt ls. I have two files in here. So now if I go up one, I can't remove this directory because there's files in here. rm dir doesn't work. What we can do is do a recursive delete. So we can remove -r example. And what this is going to do is go through all the files and folders in this particular directory and delete them. And then it's going to clean it up by deleting this entire folder. And now that's gone. If I try to cd into example, well, I don't have tab completion in there anymore. Doesn't work. If I do ls, there is no example folder. All those files and that folder is gone. Now I'm going to give you a really big warning here. rm-r, you could do some damage with your computer here. So I would highly recommend staying away from it. But it is good to know that if you have a folder and it's got 50 files in it, you don't have to delete each of the files one by one. You can possibly do it this way. But be careful, because you can delete, let's say, your entire user folder. For example, if I do pwd, I could possibly delete this entire folder, Caleb Tolling. I could delete it. I could delete all of my music. I could delete all of my websites. I could delete all of my work. And I will never be able to get that back. So be careful with this. This is probably the last warning I'm going to give you in this course, but please be careful when you are deleting things. If you have to, I would even recommend going and deleting things the long way, the GUI way. Open up your folder, your Finder, go into whatever folder you need to, and delete it by hand. Make sure it's a little bit harder for you. But if you're on a server, for instance, like a Ubuntu server for hosting websites, you're not going to have option to your GUI, your graphical user interface. You're going to have to delete from the command line, and sometimes rm-r is going to be your savior. Now, if that doesn't work, you can also do rm-rf, recursive and force, and that's going to forcefully delete everything in a folder. Again, be super careful with this. I cannot stress that enough. I have seen people do a lot of damage with this, so just be careful, because you don't get your files and folders back. There's no trash can. There's no way to get it back. You need to simply live with the consequence that you deleted something. It's gone. So that is how you delete a directory. In the last lesson, we also deleted a file. We also deleted a couple of files in a directory in this lesson. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and talk about how we can execute a command that we just wrote. Executing the last command you just wrote. Okay, so there's a couple different ways we can do this. So first of all, I'm going to clear this off, and I'm going to create a new directory, mkdir example, cd into example, ls, there's nothing in there, pwd, I'm in my example folder. These are all commands we're familiar with now. I'm just going a little bit faster. And so we want to execute the last command. So let's say touch file.txt, and I want to nano file.txt. Okay. This is a file. I'm just setting up an example here. We learned nano already. Let's go ahead, and if I wanted to run that command again, I can hit the up arrow, and that will usually cycle through the last commands if I keep hitting up, or I can hit the down arrow and that'll cycle back down. That doesn't work on all computers. It doesn't work on all operating systems. For whatever reason, it just doesn't. But what does tend to work is 2 exclamation marks. 2 exclamation marks is really, really useful, especially on Linux-based computers where it's like you have to type sudo in front of something to get it to work. And if you have to type sudo in front of something, well, that gets really annoying, because then you have to go all the way over here. You hit type up, go over here, type sudo. You don't want that. Instead, what you could do is exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And that will do the exact same command for you. So that's all there is to that one. Just a nice little shortcut. It's really useful in case you don't have the up and down arrow keys. Like these just don't cycle through your last commands for you. There's nothing to do here. I just wanted to show you that. When you're done, let's head on over to the next lesson where I introduce you to a cheat sheet. All right, I'm going to give you this awesome little cheat sheet for all of these commands, plus a lot of other commands. So the command line interface world, CLI world, is really, really big. There are a lot of different things you can do. A lot of things you probably didn't even know were possible with the computer are completely possible with the command line. It's just not as interesting as a graphical user interface. And so I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet here so that you don't have to, take this course again and again and again if you don't want to. You can just reference the cheat sheet. All right, so here we are. This is a nice little cheat sheet. This is at files.fosswire.com/2007. Command line stuff doesn't actually evolve too fast. The file name is fwunixref.pdf or fw fosswire unix reference.pdf. And you can see all the different commands that we've done in here. Well, they did al, but we did la, same thing. cd into a directory, cd into home, pwd, mkdir, removing a file, removing a directory, copying files, moving files, catting files. Oh, here's a good one. If you ever want to go and explore something, try head and tail. This one is really, really useful. We also did date and cal. That's pretty cool. Who am I is going to show you who you are when you're logged in as a user. Man is going to be incredibly powerful. This stands for manual. So whenever you're like, I don't know how to use something, you type in man and then the command, and it will usually give you instructions on how to use something. Another good one, top. Display all your running processes. Networking, a lot of good stuff in here. You can ping a host, you can who is a host. I personally like using dig, so dig and then like facebook.com. wget for downloading things, so you can download directly from your command line to whatever folder you're in. That's a very important one as well when you're using just the command line, especially when you're using it from a server. We didn't touch on file permissions. That is a bigger, scarier world. We're not going to touch on that in this crash course, in this Command Line 101 course. There's a lot of different things in here. Oh, searching. Oh, they do have grep in here. That's nice. Pattern files, searching for patterns in files. We used command pipe grep, the pattern, search for a pattern in the output of a command. And so that's what it was. You can also use locate. That's a good one. I really like that one. I probably should have actually showed you that one as well, but you can go and do that on your own time as well. Now that you know how to use the command line. So this is a nice little reference cheat sheet. Go ahead and reference this at any time. Put that in your bookmarks. Feel free to experiment with different things in here and do a lot of different Googling and figuring out how things work. But from here on out, you know how to use the command line. It's just knowing the different commands at this point. So for example, df, show disk usage. We didn't go over that because it really wasn't important in this particular course. But if you wanted to see how much space you had left on your computer, you could do df. And as an example, I'll do it. df. I could do df-h as well, and this just shows a little better. This is just a nice little parameter there, that -h. Capacity, look at that. I don't have a lot of space left on this computer. I should probably end recording soon, otherwise I'm going to run out of space pretty quickly. So go ahead, save that cheat sheet. When you're done with that, let's head on over to the next, it's not going to be a lesson, but I'm going to give you a project to work on. Okay, welcome to your project. Here's what I'm going to want you to do. I'm going to want you to do a bunch of things. So let's do this. I'm going to get out of that example folder, clear that out. And I want you to, first of all, create a new directory. So let's actually touch project.txt, nanoproject.txt. One, I want you to create a new directory in your home directory, like what I did with the example folder, that example directory. Then I want you to navigate to your new dir using the cd command. Then in here, I want you to touch a new file called test.txt, edit the file with nano. Don't forget to write out that file and then save that file as well. Then when you're out of there, I want you to cat the file you just wrote to make sure it actually all shows up. Step 6, I want you to navigate out of the folder with cd .. And then step 7, what I want you to do is delete the test directory with the new file that's in it. So delete the entire directory with the file in it. And remember, you're going to need to use -r for that. So that's getting into scary territory, but it's good practice. Make sure you only delete that folder though. Don't delete anything else. Make sure you type it all correctly as well. So go ahead, give that a shot. If you have any questions or concerns at any point in time, you can always reach out in the Learning to Code Facebook group. Me and my peers and about 60,000 other people can help you out with any sort of command line stuff at any point in time. So go ahead and give this project a shot. Once you were done, I would say you were pretty fluent with the command line. Last but not least, I would like to say thank you for taking this course. Thank you for taking my course. I know there's a lot of other courses out there, and you could have taken anyone else's, but you took mine, and I appreciate that. I just want to let you know that I really appreciate that. I'm proud of what you've done. You've come all the way through this entire course. I hope you've learned something fun and exciting, and you're excited to use the command line again. Don't forget, you can always follow me on social media at Caleb Tallien on Twitter or at coding.for.everybody on Instagram for coding tips and tricks 2, 3, 4 times a week. Thank you again for taking this course, and I hope you enjoyed it.